Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Everyday Guy podcast. This is episode 18. The title of this episode is On the Margins, The Singing Frogs. I'm your host, Rudy Marquez. I am 18 episodes in. I am reaching that 10-hour mark that I want to reach. I want to reach 10 hours of full content of just myself and then have my first guest. Episode 20, though, is going to be a doozy. I'm going to speak about some real stuff and a lot of stuff that people don't know about. But I'm excited to share it with people. So episode 20 is going to be a real telltale of where we are with the podcast. So it's May 13th. We are in the middle of our coronavirus COVID-19 lockdown. LA County has extended the lockdown till like the end of July 24th, I believe. Again, that can change too. Local school districts most likely won't be in session until August, and you got to keep in mind that it'll all be hybrid classes most likely. A mixture of probably extended studies at home and then some classroom studies. Classroom sizes are going to need to be capped. It's going to create a domino effect on our education. I want to give you guys a fair warning. There is a fucking helicopter flying around, so it's super loud. I'm going to go muted for just a few seconds as it passes by. All right, sorry about that, you guys. As most of you may know, I record straight here on my balcony, and I made a makeshift studio, and it works for me, and I love it. It's pretty dope. So, but sometimes you gotta deal with the helicopter flying around looking for someone. Um, but back to where we are. Times are forever gonna change, and nothing's gonna be the same after this. That's a fact of life right now. People may not want to acknowledge that. Um, However, we're seeing, a lot of states open up what's considered early, too early. Nobody fucking knows what's early, so who am I to speculate? But the states that have opened up, they have seen a slight increase in cases. Now, that might be a correlation to the testing that we are doing now. Um, but it there's going to be a risk. There's going to be a risk for each one. So there's going to be a risk from opening too early. People will die. There's a risk from opening later. People are going to go crazy. People cannot make it further without help financially right now. We cannot make it. The fucking helicopter's going by. I'm just going to let it go. Damn. I'm really sorry about that, you guys. But hey, if you're sticking with me, thank you so much for being with me. Um, but right now is the time for our politicians to take their heads out of their asses and make some moves. They shouldn't have any days off right now. I'm sorry. They can either be a part of history or the ones that did nothing in history. But it will be written as such, and some are wasting their friggin' time with bipartisan bullshit, and it's red throwing crap at blue, and blue ain't holding their shit, they're throwing it back. It's constant. You got Trump that tries to negate and push us to maybe a different topic so we get our minds off of coronavirus and the fall of our economy and possibly the fall of our country. It's scary freaking times right now. I can't stress that enough. It is scary as hell. And it's just the way of life right now, but I'm hoping things get better. Um, but here I am, and I'll have this flag next to me and behind me, because I still believe in what this nation could be. The men that built this nation they're rolling in their graves. They didn't do it right either, but damn man, we could do better than this. as Americans, we can do better than this. Mexican Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, whatever kind of American you are, Irish American, Italian American, you're an American. We got to come together. We got to stop the bullshit, man. You guys are letting these dickhead politicians divide us. It's ridiculous. It's poor rhetoric. I don't understand it sometimes. Um, there's the first, like, just to put in essence how horrible our government is starting to become. The first stimulus package was written up by the Republicans, sent out. Dems rejected it, hated, some parts of it, that finances were going, or some money was going to places the Dems didn't want it to. So, Dems write the second stimulus bill. Republicans reject that shit. Dems are trying to get away with sending money to all kinds of places, and the Republicans aren't having it. It's a part of politics. It's everybody has an agenda. Each of these groups has an agenda, and if you're not a part of that agenda, what's your point of being in that group? And to pledge your allegiance to that being Democrat or Republican, God, people are gonna die for the dumbest things, and it's horrible. So we can either grow and come together, or we can just sit back and watch the world burn. That's the honest fucking truth, man. But that's all I want to spend on, the shitty times that are going on around us right now. This next segment, though, is brought to you by my friends at Downey Dave's Barbershop. Look, you can go to some $10 barber and get the worst cut of your life. Trust me, I've been there. No bullshit. Once I had a fucking hard part shaved into my beautiful hair, and my best friend, the guy who actually owns the barbershop now, he clowned me for years, dude, for years. That's how long it took me to grow back, like, my hairline right here, because I fucked it up, dude. I trusted a barber that was all tatted down, and he kind of scared me, so I just was like, oh yeah, hard part, cool, man, go for it. Horrible. It was like this thick. It was like a freeway. So don't do what I did. I've been to goddamn barbers in car garages. I've been to barbers that just started their career the haircut before me. So don't go to some hole-in-the-wall barber. Go to Downey Dave's. Downey Dave's has been in the game for more than 25 fucking years. They're not just your up-and-coming barber that just learned how to cut hair. These barbers are experienced, and they're fucking cool as shit, dude. You'll always have a good conversation in there. You'll get a quick cut, and they'll take care of you in there. You got little ones, and they probably look wild right now. Get down to Downey Dave's barbershop, man. And after all this bullshit it blows over, people are going to need to get cuts. Go to Downey Dave's. Downey Dave's barbershop is located at 8032 Stewart and Gray Road in Downey, California. You can see them on any social media under Downey Dave's Barbershop. Check them out. Leave them a review. Tell them I sent you if they don't know who I am. Fuck them. I'm just kidding. But check them out. Downey Dave's is the best. So the next segment 1. On the margins, the singing frogs. This is actually going to be my only segment of the day, because I really spent some time kind of investigating and looking into this topic. So I want everyone to know what this segment of On the Margins is about. I don't want this segment to be a glorification of crime or brutality or gang violence or organized crime. However, I don't think it's productive for us as a society to ignore these true individuals that are on the margins of our society. And I'm gonna have guests from the edges of those margins, and some are gonna be labeled as gang members. I always found the troubled life just so appealing to me because of the close effects it's had on my family personally. Um, just to give you a little history, my father, he was raised in Pico Rivera, and then he came to Southside Whittier back in the early 60s and 70s. So he had his share of the degenerate lifestyle. Uh, my mom grew up in Puente and saw her share of drugs and gangs, and my uncles were incarcerated for long, long portions of their life. My brother has been incarcerated many times and struggles with making it in this world in a legitimate way. So yeah, people on the margins of society have always had my interest. Now that I have my podcast, I want to incorporate my interests. However, before I start, I want to make it known I will relate most of this back to the mindset of the individual. So what I want to do is develop the type of mindset of the person that decides to join that gang and the people I'm about to talk about, why they might have decided to go that way. And I want to use that by showing a little bit of history of these people. So it helps me get an understanding of why a man or a woman would want to do what they do. So I hope you enjoy. Here is my piece on a local gang that I've had experience with in the past. The gang I have decided to start this segment with is called Canta Ranas. Canta Ranas. CR. In English, it translates to the singing frogs. Canta Ranas is a old clica, man, from way back when. For me, I grew up on the border of Whittier and Santa Fe Springs. I got to see the influence of smaller gangs like Whittier Trece or Southside Whittier. Canta Ranas, it was given that the Black Hand from La M, also known as the Mexican Mafia, they got the protection. So that means you're forever indebted to the Mafia for their protection. So you got to pay tribute monetarily. They don't give a fuck where you get it from, but you better get it, and you better have their money for them every time they ask, or whatever the arrangement is. It's a common tactic used by organized crime syndicates to gain respect and also just provide protection to people that cannot go to the police. Your money launderers, your bankers that might be into false banking, attorneys that are, very good at persuading certain outcomes in the courtroom. You got a lot of people, man, that need to get paid. So organized crime is huge, and it's exactly that. It's extremely organized. These are not displaced youths that just wanted to do a drive-by on someone. These are calculated men, and they grew up blocks away from me. No bullshit. My brother knew a lot of these dudes. I got to talk to my brother the other day. Unfortunately, he's incarcerated at the moment, but I got to talk to him and ask him a few questions about anything he might have known about Canta Ranas, and he doesn't speak much, and he had just let me know about their history, and so I looked into a little more, and the way it turns out is Canta Ranas, it began in Santa Fe Springs in like the early 40s. The reason they termed it Canta Ranas is due to the swamps filled with frogs always croaking during heavy rains. So at the time, it was not developed land, so it was nothing but swamps and fields and fucking cattle and shit. And during heavy rains, all the frogs would just be going crazy, so they called it Canta Ranas, the singing frogs. Canta Ranas emanated from the rough streets of East LA. Families left those areas and fled to Santa Fe Springs, Whittier, Montebello, Norwalk, and they all kind of just came east of Whittier. And if I always have this crazy thing, if you look at the city of Whittier and you go down the line from, let's say, East LA to Montebello to Pico Rivera to Whittier to La Habra to Brea, and things just progressively get better. I say better like the poverty is starting to be eradicated as those communities grow. Like in Brea, there's not much poverty, but if you go into East Los, you're going to see a lot of poverty. It's crazy, and I grew up right in the middle, so I got to see the both ends. I got to hang out with the rich white folk out in Anaheim Hills and Yorba Linda and do crazy party shit there, and then I'm over here in the slums, like hanging out where I feel comfortable. I grew up in both worlds, man. So Canta Ranas always had my interest. Like, wow, how did this gang come to be? And you know, so families fled from East LA to these areas, Santa Fe Springs and Whittier mainly, and with this migration came misplaced youth. They were everywhere, and they were brown, and they did not speak a lick of English, and they were trying to learn the language. Most were first generation Mexicans, and they couldn't adapt to the American traditions and cultures that were already established here. They didn't speak the language, so they were ousted by their white, school colleagues. And my pops grew up in South Whittier, where like before, like homes were there. He grew up where Sunshine Liquor was, and there was nothing there. He said you can ride your bike from there all the way down to L.A. and it's just through the fields. So he always spoke of having to run home, and this was in his hometown of Whittier. Um, After school, he had to walk through what he called Billy Goat Acres, and he called it that because the families that lived there in that area were all white folk, and they didn't take too kindly to Mexican kids going to their schools. Uh, so they chased my dad and call him Spick and Wetback and beat his ass as soon as he'd leave his school, so he had to run from school all the way back home, right? So, what does a Mexican kid do in 1955? They form a brotherhood. What do you expect? They had 15 members that wanted to protect their own and also give themselves a sense of belonging in a world that really just kind of pushed them away and did not accept them. They found belonging amongst themselves. It's quite common for us to do that. We fall into our own norms always, and we fall into, who we feel comfortable by. That's why there's Chinatowns. That's why there's Koreatowns. That's why there's the Italian district. Because people want to feel comfortable in their own environments. I don't know if that's racism. I don't know. But it's a way of life, and it does affect gang members as well. That's why there's black gangs, white gangs, Mexican gangs, Asian gangs. Uh, they're everywhere. People want to feel like they belong to a group that also identifies to whatever they might be going through or might be thinking. Um, so it gave them, a sense of worth, and then this gang started. Canta Ranas, it quickly grew, and although they never matched the numbers of like larger gangs like 18th Street or MS-13, at their highest, I think they had 150 members, but they were warriors. Somos pocos pero locos. We're not many, but we're crazy. That's what that translates to. Fast forward though to modern times, this brotherhood grew, and they became more and more organized, no longer dysfunctional. They had rankings. They had rankings at work, and they set their soldiers in line when they got out of line. Um, and really, that's when they caught the attention of local authorities, and the cops, they started an operation called Frog Legs, and that's kind of where Cantananas became known for their loyalty to the gang. Uh, and then Vietnam comes and breaks up a few of these organizations and gangs, and Pachucos and Zoot Suiters and all these dudes start getting broken up, and they don't know where to go. And so Vietnam kind of changes things and starts creating men. And so after Vietnam's over, these men have to come home to a civilian life, and they don't know how to adapt. They're missing that brotherhood that they got from the military. So as soon as some of them returned, they started their own motorcycle gangs or clubs. A motorcycle club like the Mongols. It rose from Vietnam veterans that were rejected from the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels said, "Nah, we ain't gonna let you brown boys in here." They said, "Fuck you guys, we'll start our own," and they did. The dudes that were in Vietnam, some of them came back and jumped on that opium, man. That shit in Vietnam was pure, so they got back on that pookie stick as soon as they got here, and a lot of them went down the wrong path. And unfortunately, drugs does lead to um, interaction with gangs. If you're gonna buy drugs, you're gonna meet a gang member for sure. If not, somebody owns those drugs. Yeah. Um, and you know things got worse even through the 80s and 90s, but it's been covered a lot, and people have already spoke of this, so I want to bring more of a modern touch to where these gangs are standing. So something I found interesting was back in March of this year, 2 months ago, a local dude was sentenced to life in prison for whacking a fellow Mexican mafia member. He was facing a litany of charges from racketeering to murder. Where did he come up? Whittier, California. Jumped into Canta Ranas at age 13. 13 years old. This boy was jumped into Canta Ranas. Began as one of 150 members. That again was graced by that black hand, La M. The protection was given. People were like, who the fuck is Canta Ranas? Then they started realizing, oh shit, you can't touch them. They're protected. That's what happened. You know, this 13-year-old is just a latchkey kid growing up in a moderately nice area of Whittier. It's an area I'm not too familiar with, but I've been there and it's been peaceful. Every time I've been there, I don't see any alarming issues. You know what? My brother lived in there though, and he kind of fucked it up. He had like what looked like a chop shop. No bullshit. It wasn't a chop shop, but it looked like it, dude. And my brother just looks rough and tough, so cops would always be hassling his ass, like, "What are you working on? What are you working on?" He's like, "Dude, I'm just working on my cars, dude." And but they would always be on his ass. Um, but back to what happened in 2020. Um, this dude, Jose Luis Loza, he's charged with, or he's actually sentenced in March of 2020 for murder, and he got sentenced life. He got sentenced to life. Weird ass trial. He spent 2 days on the stand speaking of La M, which is something you don't do. La M is, I don't think there's record of La M being spoken of in the courtroom other than by, people that have left the gang or the organization. This dude's very, very active in the gang and, was a main shot caller. And the fact that he went up there and spoke of really their processes, their hierarchy, and a lot of information. I don't know if he was doing it as like a last hurrah because he's going away for life, but this was not a good dude. And although he was sentenced this year, this dates back to that Operation Frog Legs back in 2016. I'm going to pull up an article that I just found so freaking fascinating. If you go to justice.gov, only go to gov websites, or if you're going to do research, try to do it on the most credible sites possible. So if you go to gov or justice.gov and you type in federal racketeering indictment, Canta Ranas, that's spelled Canta, and then space. Ranas is Ranas. Canta Ranas. I don't speak Spanish very well, but I can say that word kind of good. But you'll see for their immediate release back in June of 2016, they put out what they did. So it was a result of a racketeering indictment issued by a grand jury. 31 members and associates of the Santa Fe Springs-based gang were arrested today on charges relating to wide-ranging criminal enterprise controlled by a member of the Mexican mafia that is allegedly responsible for the murder of a rival gangster and the attempted murder of a Whittier police officer. These guys were nothing to fuck around with. They had plans to take out a Whittier PD cop. They had outlined in gruesome detail on what they were going to do. It was a 147-page indictment, and it named 51 defendants, including the so-called shot caller of the Canta Ranas street gang, which operates in Santa Fe Springs in Whittier, California. The indictment alleges that an incarcerated member of the Mexican Mafia prison gang exerts control over Canta Ranas and other gangs, and that he received compensation in the form of rent or taxes generated by drug trafficking and other offenses committed in gang territory. Again, you gotta pay your taxes. That's it. You're paying for that protection. This dude's incarcerated and protects dudes on the street. That blows my mind. And he's earning money for something that you can't even hold. You can't hold protection, but you can show it, and they do. And the lead defendant in that 35 count indictment is Jose Loza. He was a full-fledged member of the Mexican Mafia, and he's a shot caller of Canta Ranas. In addition, they had a rap pretty much give Loza up, and Loza apparently executed another member of the Mexican Mafia who wanted to expand his influence and challenge his authority over the street gangs in San Gabriel Valley. During the incident 2 months ago at a restaurant in the San Gabriel Valley community of Bassett, the Mexican Mafia member was fatally shot, his bodyguard was severely wounded, and an innocent restaurant patron was shot 6 times in the abdomen. And again, this all comes from a gang that I grew up next to. Always heard of CR running into issues with local gangs in my area, or local gangs that came from different areas. We'd get dudes from LA that had come from, Florencia, Maravilla, and sometimes they'd have a clash with the other gangs around here. But Canta Ranas was an untouchable gang for such a long time. And as this indictment came a gang injunction. And that was my first experience understanding what a gang injunction was. But basically, if you're a member of that gang, you cannot meet with another member of the same gang. You cannot be around gang members at all. You can go to jail just for standing next to another gang member if 2 of them are together in public. I mean, there's 2 sides to that. It created safer streets visually, but it also pushed everything underground and made things harder for the authorities to track and monitor. And they had put a gang injunction on them prior to Operation Frog Legs, so they were already becoming a target. But once they had the gang injunction, they just got better at hiding it. And obviously, the gang injunction did not stop communication between a Mexican Mafia member incarcerated in Pelican Bay and a street gang in Whittier and Santa Fe Springs. And there's still a lot of how can I say this? There's offspring of these gentlemen, and they do have allegiance to their gangs, and they still feel very passionately about their gangs. They have brothers that are in them, got uncles. So you need to be aware. There's a lot of people out there that don't have the best interests in you. But you also need to be aware that some people are just on the margins of society and they don't know how to live. Do not judge them. Attempt to understand how they live, why they live like that. There's a lot you can learn from them. For me, recounting or investigating things like this makes me reflect on a 13-year-old Rudy. And had I been faced with those same challenges of being a latchkey kid in a community that really absorbs you into the gang, I probably would have fallen into it. I had a great group of friends coming up, though, that would never allow me to fall into those nasty paths. We didn't do that to each other. We held each other accountable. That's why we all made it out of there without any gang affiliations. But there were a lot of kids around me that I understood why they went. But I don't think I ever came to terms with the nature of them accepting that that's their fate. That prison or jail or religion may be your future. And these kids make these decisions at such a young age. 13 years old. I probably don't even know how to go to the bathroom right yet. You know, I'm not in control of my life at 13 years old. And I think about my kids. I'd never put them in the situation where they are offered a gang membership, you know, an acceptance into it. They belong to me. They belong with me. They don't need that. So it helps me understand how to approach people that may be going and searching for companionship in a gang or a brotherhood. And I'm not trying to steer anybody away from it. People are going to do what they're going to do. However, it gives me a better understanding as to why they do what they do. They're so displaced, or they feel so unwelcomed in the world. They have nothing else, so they give up. Although they don't throw their hands up and just lay on the floor and do nothing. They give up mentally and decide that the path of being on the straight and narrow doesn't work for them. It's either not fast enough, or it's not producing what they want. But they decide to go down that negative path. And for me, it really touches home because there's been a lot of chances for me to go down a negative path in life. And although I have made a ton of mistakes and things that I do regret, I did not follow that path. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful that I have the gift of being able to communicate. And I hope that I can continue my podcast and sharing these different interesting little tidbits that maybe you didn't know about your community or didn't know about a different community. I don't want to stay local. I want to talk about all different types of organizations. And I really look forward to having people that are interested in also talking about those things. That is not the main focus of the podcast, but it is a segment of mine. So I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure you share this with someone. Word of mouth is the only way I can make this podcast grow. Social media is great, but really if you just share, like, hey man, give this dude a listen, that helps me the most. So hopefully you guys can do that for me. But thank you.